By popular request, I'm going to be doing a training on my time in sales when I was closing over 200k per week in contracts. I find the biggest resistance point for a lot of sellers is actually just picking up the phone and making dials. Always get a commitment of a day and time when you are asking them to do something. When could you do that by? I just knew I needed to get 5 people every single day to agree to watch that training video. I'm not here to waste time. I'm here to find out if you're serious about solving whatever problem you've shown interest in. Record your own calls for reviewing and improving your pitches, just like athletes record their game footage. Record your gameplay and make sure that you are recording your calls. Okay, by popular request, I'm going to be doing a training on my time in sales when I was closing over 200k per week in contracts. The average contract value for full transparency that I was closing at was 26k, and I was averaging 6 to 8 contracts per week. And for anyone that's been in sales for a little while, that's relatively good results. So I'm going to walk through what my day looked like when I was closing 7 figures a month. So as I mentioned, in my time in sales, this was before business. That was my peak that I reached. It was closing, 6 to 8 contracts per week. So 6 times 26, 120, 180. So we're floating between 180 to 140, 240K, so averaging out at about 200K a week worth of new business in a startup setting. So I was the only seller for a long time hitting these numbers. And then we brought in other sellers, but they just couldn't seem to replicate my sort of performance. Did okay because of the business model, but not to this level. So was it because I was such a great salesperson, I was a superstar, that I was able to hit these numbers? Definitely not. I'm not too bad at sales. Obviously you can't hit those sort of numbers without being relatively proficient, but I was definitely not a superstar. I was definitely not someone that was given God's gifts to selling. What I was good at was really understanding what moved the needle for these prospects, for these potential clients, and how I could run that into my process so that, one, I could close most efficiently, but also how I could build a system that progressed these clients through their own buying journey. That's a story for another day, but that on top of having great market timing with the offer, a good offer, and then again, great systems, they're the things that enabled me to hit those sort of numbers, not some slick sales script or silver tongue skill that I had. I definitely wasn't born or gifted with sales skills. The skills that I do have, I've had to acquire over thousands and thousands of hours of reps, as well as research, study, learning, getting mentoring, etc. But at this peak, I definitely got lucky by being in the right vehicle at the right time with the right offer with a good system that we set up. So I don't want to make it sound like this sort of level of achievement is possible for everyone, because sometimes you can just be in a market or an offer that this sort of level of performance is not attainable at. So here's why I was able to hit those numbers. I had structure. While most reps are reactive to their day, I was proactive, having my day planned the previous day, and each day was just a system of methodical processes that I would work through, obviously with nuance to each of that, and there was never days that were exactly the same as the other, but there was an overall structure that I would follow, and then I would adapt to that day and to those circumstances that came out. So what did my average day look like? Roughly, I would start around 8 to 9 where I'm preparing for the day, just catching up on emails, doing this, that, the other, getting myself in the zone, researching, just doing whatever. Whatever else was going to get me in a state of mind, plus anything I just needed to catch up on, I would just tinker through that between 8 till 9. From 9 to 11, I'd be hardcore prospecting, so that's doing outbound dials, messages, everything I needed to do to fill the pipeline, get people interested in what it is that we can possibly do. From 11 to 11:30, I would be doing early stage follow-up. I would go to the gym in the middle of the day there around lunchtime. I know some people don't really like that because it's obviously a pretty good time to be hitting dials, but I could afford it at that time. My system was so structured that I could take that hour and a half out of the day to go train, have lunch, and stuff like that. In retrospect, now being a business owner, I would probably, now I train at the start of the day, early morning, so I don't interrupt potential call time, potential meeting time, etc. But again, at that stage, when you're closing a couple $100,000 a week, and your system's relatively dialed in, I was afforded some extra luxuries. So then once I got back from the gym and having some lunch, I basically get into pitches for the rest of the afternoon from 1-ish till 5-ish, and then from 5 till 6-ish, I'll be doing ladder stage follow-up. So this was my day pretty much every single day. Now there was nuances in these timings and nuances in what happened within these blocks, but the blocks themselves were the same every time. So sometimes I would finish prospecting in terms of my input target at around like 10:30 if I had just a really good run with pickups or response rates from prospects, etc. Sometimes if my early stage follow-up was really early stage and I didn't have any call schedule, which I'll go into my structure for follow-up in a tick, but if I didn't have any particular call schedule for follow-up, then I would just be banging out messages and I could be done in 15 minutes. So regardless of this structure, there was always fluidity and the ability to adapt based on what was happening. But this is how my general day would look. So again, in following this, I was able to reach that 200K per week consistently, not just for a week, not just for a month, but for 18 months straight before I then went into my own business. And I did all of this without a CRM initially or crazy automation. So for the first 9 months-ish of running this system, hitting these numbers, we didn't have a CRM, which was silly in retrospect. It would have probably made things that little bit more efficient, but I'll show you the spreadsheets that I used, and not the actual ones because obviously they have people's numbers and stuff on them, but I'll show you the ones that, or the actual structure that I used in the spreadsheets. And then we didn't have any wild automations, research, this, that, the other. Just had super clean, simple process. So let's go through that. Again, the days would start with prospecting. So I would start with the highest value sources. So what that means is if we had, say, leads come inbound to the company or inbound to the founder, I would reach out to them first because I know they're typically the hottest. They're typically the people that are most likely to progress through pipeline faster because for whatever reason, they've done enough research outside of that they actively reached out themselves to the company indicating interest. So they're going to be the highest value source. Then I would move to high intent lead generation sources. So they're leads that have opted in, consumed some sort of information and put an application through to the company. So I'd be making outbound calls to them. Then I would go into other methodologies, whether it's messaging, cold outreach, or if we had other leads floating around, or I would go to leads that I've already dialed once, twice, 3 times, and I would work my way down the system. So again, I would start with the highest priority, then I would work my way down based on the efficiency of that particular source. So I know that, for example, with inbound leads, typically at least like 7 out of 10 would probably close. So that's going to be a high priority source, whereas high intent lead gen, I would typically have about a 10% lead to revenue rate. So I knew for every 20 leads, I would generally have 2 sales come through that would follow through in the pipeline. So how those numbers looked with that high intent model was for every 20 leads, I'd speak to about 5 who would agree to watch our transition bridge, our video. From those 5, 2 would indicate clear interest and apply to go to the next stage. And then I would typically close 1 to 2. So I'd have an 86% average closing rate. So I'd have my high intent here, which we didn't get a ton of these, even though we had quite a good brand presence in the market. We didn't get a ton of inbound because we weren't really working that channel from a marketing perspective. A lot of it was driven by the high intent lead gen model. And then we'd have supplementary sales come through. And then we'd have supplementary sales coming through from socials and other areas of proactive outreach that I was doing, such as opening new threads via social market. But the first thing I would always do is pick up the phone. I'd make sure that first action I take is calling someone, because that's always, I find, the biggest resistance point for a lot of sellers is actually just picking up the phone and making dials. So I pull up the prospect list, open it up, start dialing. Then have clear number targets for what you're trying to achieve in that block. And then what I would do is normally draw on a whiteboard. So for this, my target was 5 people agreeing to watch the transition bridge. If I was on a roll and say got to like 9:30, 10 o'clock and I'd already hit 5, I would just go for more. But most days I would aim for 5 and I would just cross them off the board as I got there. So I know I'm steadily working towards it. And for me, I've really focused on qualifying, not just booking meetings. I didn't even book meetings in this role. We started doing that, but I found it way more efficient to enroll people into watching the transition bridge and get their commitment to viewing that video if I found that they have a problem that I feel we can solve, and then scheduling a time to touch base and see if that video resonated. Not book a meeting to discuss the problem, but just see if what they went through in that collateral resonated with them. It's still booking something, but it's not like a KPI of I need to book 5 meetings in the morning. So I need to get 5 people to agree to watch this training at a certain date. So I'm recording this on a Monday. So if I identify that someone had the problem, they recognize they had the problem that we could possibly solve, then they agree that they want to watch the training video to understand how we can possibly help them solve that problem. I would then say, okay, that training goes for about 60 minutes or 45 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever that is. For us, it was 2 hours, so it's pretty intense. But that training goes for a couple of hours. Do you think you would have a chance to view that full training by Wednesday? And then most of the time they would say yes. So then I would schedule a follow-up for Wednesday. Initially it would be a text one, which I'll go through in the follow-up section. But yeah, then I'll touch base with them on Wednesday, see if it resonated. If it didn't resonate, awesome, palm them off. If it did resonate, great, we progress the sales process. So that was, again, one of the reasons why I had such a high close rate, because we just had a really strong filtering mechanism. I was not desperate for anyone. It was just, you have a problem. This video can show you how you could solve that problem. If you resonate with the way that we solve that problem, then let's have a further chat about how we can solve that problem for you. Not, let's book a meeting, have a strategy session and talk about it, etc. I'll give you all the information in the video, then you decide. So that door was always open to prospects, and if you've heard me talk about sales before, you would know one of my core principles is having an open door policy with prospects, making sure they know that, hey, I'm always willing to walk away from this table if I'm not feeling the right vibe or if I'm not seeing the right signals from you that this is going to be a good fit. I don't need the sale. I'm willing to walk away. You have the problem. I have a solution. If they meet in the middle, great. If they don't, I don't care, because I've got plenty of other candidates that I can go speak to. So some of the keys to successful prospecting is always set up the next step. That's something that I find people don't do, especially if they try and run that play that I ran with, say, giving collateral. It's like, hey, can you go through this? And then if it resonates, then let's have a chat after that. And then that's where they leave it. They don't schedule a time. So always get a commitment of a day and time when you are asking them to do something. When could you do that by? Awesome. So if I reach out at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, you think you could probably have that completed by then? Yep, awesome. All right, cool. I'll reach out to you at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, and then if what you have gone through has resonated, great, we'll schedule some next steps to have more discussions from there. If it hasn't, just please let me know, and obviously I'll just take you off the list. No harm done at all. So always set up next steps, be clear on your inputs, know what you need to do roughly to get those numbers. So I never tracked how many dials it took me to get those 5, because some days it would be like 10 dials, other days it would be 30. So I don't track that number, but I just knew I needed to get 5 people every single day to agree to watch that training video. If I set the frames correctly and I set them up properly, I would get on average 2 people that will watch it and resonate with it, and then close very highly off the back end. So by knowing that I just need to hit 5, it gave me a clear focus for this 2-hour block. And that flows into the next tip as well, align your inputs to the buyers. Again, I wasn't just trying to book 5 meetings, I was trying to get 5 people to agree that they want to understand how we help solve this problem. So for the buyer, it was fully aligned to how they want to buy, because buyers today want to be educated about what they're potentially getting involved in. They don't want to just be thrown into a sales process. So this way we filtered out a lot of the people that weren't serious, but for the ones that were, we had high alignment to the way that they want to buy. We helped them get educated about the problem. We helped them understand the way that we possibly solve the problem, from the pillars that we use, the steps that we take, so on and so forth. And then that way, when we actually had a sales conversation, they were more informed about how we can possibly partner with them to solve that problem versus coming in blind and then just trying to trust everything we say on a sales call. Next, open door policy. Already mentioned that. Just make sure that the door's always open. Have a strong transition bridge, which is what I call that video that goes between. Because in my mind, it helps someone transition from a point of possible interest to red hot interest So we need to make sure that transition bridge is obviously strong, and then a high intent focus. Yes, that's what it says. What that means is focus on the highest probable pipeline source that is likely to have the fastest sales velocity. So going into the next stage, which is the early intent follow-up, I'll just do it on the spreadsheet to demonstrate how I actually did it. So for the majority of the time I was closing at that level, I was just working off this spreadsheet. So obviously this is just a replica of that spreadsheet with no details in there. But this was the flow that I had. I would have all these docs down the bottom. These weekly totals would self-populate, and then source-wise, that would self-populate as well. So we'd have an automation set up via Zapier that when a lead comes in from whatever source, it would just populate straight into this pipeline or this spreadsheet. Now in there, that would capture the source as well, and then I would filter this by the source so that then my highest priority shifted to the top and lowest priority to the bottom. Now with that, let's just say a lead popped in here at blah blah blah. Some guy called Tim Jeff or Tim G. Let's unbold that. Number in there. AU took, and let's say he answered, so took some notes, and his source was FB application. And let's just say he was qualified. And I was like, okay, cool. Had a good chat with Tim. He agreed to watch the webinar. What I would then do is chuck him in green, copy his row, drag him across to here, paste him in, and we'll get rid of that one, so I don't need status there. So then that would be source, and then this was whatever notes were taken. Cool. So then when that one was in green, he would be in my follow-up list. So then I would delete him off this lead list. So I always made sure I kept this list super clean. I've seen some people that have like color codes all, and they just have it all in the one list. I found that just super messy. So I would delete them off that list and have them just in here. Then anyone that was a spud or disqualified, I would chuck them in here and highlight them red, just so we don't delete the contact altogether. And then anyone that didn't answer, so say I called Tim and he didn't answer, I would copy his row, and sometimes I would highlight it orange or I'd just leave it blank, then paste in there. And you can tell this needs a bit of updating. It's been a while since I cracked open this spreadsheet, but obviously make sure that all of these are in sync to how you would want it. Otherwise you'll find that, yeah, you'll end up with the wrong information being copied across. So dialed, yeah, then anyone that's 5 times dialed. So I would also have on the edge here a dial tally. So I ran up to 5. Some people only run up to 3, so it depends what you want to run up to. But call him, I'll do 1. Then when he hits 2, I'll do 2, 3, 4, 5. Most of the time I wouldn't even get to the bottom of the ones that hit 5, so this list pretty much stayed empty outside of the when I first jumped into doing this. But then I would also filter this dial tally so that the ones with 1 dial came to the top, and I'll work my way down, because obviously the ones who have been dialed 3, 4, 5 times without answering, less likely than someone who's been dialed once or twice. So I'd work my way down from the top. If I called all the new leads and I hadn't hit my KPI or my target of getting 5 people to agree to watch the transition bridge. So starting here, this will be my high intent source. I would filter it by source. So I go for the highest intent ones first. Then I go into dialed. I filter that by dial tally as opposed to source. You could probably do both, but I just found it easier just to filter by dial tally. And then I barely touch this. I don't think I ever really touched this. So that's how I managed 200K a week worth of pipeline in this spreadsheet. We did eventually get a CRM, but it didn't really make any difference to my productivity. I just did the same process just in a CRM. So yeah, now that Tim has agreed to watch it, he will go into this webinar follow-up tab. So then I'll have a date. So let's say he agreed to watch this on Wednesday. I'm recording this on the 24th of March, so 26th of the 3rd. Then I will go through at the end of each day, and I'll go, okay, what day is it? And I'll just go find all the people at whichever stage they're at, say today the 24th, or say this got to Wednesday at 26th, and Tim was on there. So I would initially generally start with a follow-up text, just because I was super busy, so I didn't have a ton of time to start chasing people around. And I generally got a pretty good response rate from the text as well. So I would start off with text. If Tim didn't respond or hadn't watched it, I would do that. Then if he said, I haven't watched it, mate, I would get a second agreement to when he could watch it, then get him to give me a day. If he didn't answer, I would follow up 2 days later with a call. So I would just put that in there. And then third and final call, so I had a 3-strike rule with follow-ups. If you didn't do what you said you were going to do 3 times, I've got bigger fish to fry. I'm not going to chase you around to do something that you said you were going to do. So I would just bump them off, but then that would be 30. Actually, that would fall on a weekend, so be like whatever that works out to be, 2nd or the 4th or whatever the Monday is. And then I would go through each day in that follow-up block, and I would look for the ones that needed following up. So based on the day, today is the 24th, go through and find all the ones that are the 24th. If it's a bunch of texts, I'll send the text. I had a templated text that I would send out, so just copy, paste, change the name. Then for calls, I would just make all the calls that came up, and then anyone that didn't do what they needed to do would get red, knocked to that, and then if they got triple red, they would go into the spud list. Sometimes I would leave them in here if they were potentially like a really cool person and for whatever reason they just didn't do it over those 3 times. I would maybe give them a later chance if I ran out of leads to call, but most of the time I'd shove people in the spud list. Let's say Tim did respond positively. He's like, yep, looked really good, I want to have a chat about this. Awesome. Then I would give him a quick call, like, awesome Tim, just need to set up a quick time for us to chat, and then I would bring him across to here. So then he would be in pitch booked. Let's make sure that aligns. And then sales follow-up would be the end of the day stuff, so I'll check that in a bit. But yeah, then any sales would come through here. So anyone that got pitched, you could have, I would just put it in notes if they no-showed. So on the side of their notes, I would put no-show if they no-showed, and I would highlight them orange. But I never had no-shows on this. Obviously, if they've gone from having a chat, telling them that they can walk away, and then they've watched a 2-hour thing and said, yep, really interested, want to have a chat about it. I never got no-shows, but if I was to get a no-show, I would have done that and put it in. Pitch booked, sales, if it was a close lost, I would just leave it in there. You could have a separate tab for close lost as well. So you could just do duplicate, close lost, and then just, I would flick them red, put notes in as to why they were closed lost, and then just leave them there. Then, yeah, sales will go to there, and then sales follow-up is the thing I do at the end of the day. So I'll go to that actually afterwards. We'll jump back into the slides. So the biggest chunk of the day, and obviously the moneymaker, is pitches. Now, how I made sure that I was closing at 86% and closing at such a high percentage, you probably picked up on quite a few of the tips as I was going through that process then. It was pretty stringent, and I ensured that there were strong frames set throughout the entire process. Like when I would make an outbound call to an application or a high intent lead gen source, my first question was doing X something you were serious about. I would jump straight into it, setting a frame of like, I'm not here to waste time. I'm here to find out if you're serious about solving whatever problem you've shown interest in. So that could sound like, hey, was that John? Yes, it was John. Hey, John, this was Sam calling from XYZ company. Just a really quick call, mate, as we received your application to X, Y, and Z, whatever the offer is. Was, whatever the outcome is, XYZ, something you were serious about? Now, sometimes you could stagger that out, depending on, again, the source, but that was pretty much how I would jump straight into it 99% of the time. If the source was a little bit different, I would maybe throw in, we received your application for X, Y, and Z. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, that rings a bell. Awesome. So was solving or was doing X, Y, and Z something you were serious about? And then flow from there. Now, I maintain those sort of frames all the way through the conversation. I would be polite, cordial, friendly, have a joke, have a laugh, like be normal, be a human, but just keep in mind what frame am I setting by saying what I'm saying. I find a lot of people get so caught up in trying to sell or convince the person, like, oh, you'd be great for this. This would be amazing for your business. Wow, you're already doing so well. Imagine how well you could do if you did this or whatever. All of that sort of beta play is just lowering your status in the conversation. because the prospect knows you're just trying to sell them. They're not, even if they don't consciously know it, they subconsciously know something feels off, and you're setting yourself up for failure by getting into that sort of language. Whereas if you are setting strong frames like that throughout the conversation, the prospect will respect you. They'll understand your position that, hey, I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to sell you. I'm here to find out if you have a problem, and if I can help you solve that problem with what we have to offer. Then I'll have the sales collateral to help inform them on how we can solve that problem. And then we have the conversation from there. So none of it is pushing the prospect through to what I want them to do. It's just me finding out, are you qualified? Can I solve the problem? Do you even have the problem? And then, progressing them to the next step if that is the case. So use tools like the transition bridge and tasking to empower the prospect. We want to empower the prospects because we want them to feel like they are in control of the buying journey. Like they're getting the information they need, they're getting provided the tools and resources to help them make a buying decision, so that when they do come to the stage of making that decision, they feel like it's come off their own accord. They haven't been manipulated, twisted, turned to try and get them to that point of purchasing. Now, obviously, those tools are structured in a way to help us progress the sales conversation with strategic messaging and strategic processes, so on and so forth, but it gives the prospect that feeling of control. And some last minute tips for pitching. I'm not going to go into a full training on how to pitch. I think I've got other videos on that somewhere. But give yourself buffer time between your calls. Don't back your calls back to back. I found that super annoying. If I did that, I would often run into other calls, so I'd be late for the following call, and then you're late for the next one, and it snowballs from that. So give yourself 15-minute buffer time. Always temp check a prospect or new client before you pass them on to customer success. So when you wrap up a call, ask them, so John, how are you feeling? Excited, nervous, a little bit of both? And oftentimes they'll say, oh yeah, just a little bit of both, but excited. Like, awesome, mate, that's totally normal. That's how a lot of our clients generally start, but we'll get you straight into the onboarding process. It'll help settle those nerves and give you a clear roadmap as to what's to come. Something like that to help temp check them before they go to CS. And then record your own calls for reviewing and improving your pitches. Just like athletes record their game footage, record your gameplay, and make sure that you are recording your calls. Now, the latter stage follow-up, I've already gone through this a little bit, but on the lead list, that would be in here. So say I pitch someone, let's move this to here and have this as closed one instead of sales. So let's just say closed one, we'll adjust that as we go, just so it all matches up. Didn't manage to close them, but they didn't say no. They wanted to, if I couldn't get around the objection, they needed to think about it. They couldn't pay the down payment, but they really wanted to do it, and they were going to go source some financing, source some cash from somewhere else. Whatever the reason, they would go into the sales follow-up. So that would be my latter stage follow-up. My end of the day would be this. So I would have the notes in there as to what I'm following up with, and then I would obviously do that follow-up. So the keys to this is always have a reason for following up. Never be just following up. So the worst thing you can say as a salesperson is giving a prospect or someone that you've had a conversation with a call or an email or a text saying, hey mate, just following up, because you haven't established a next step. It's the weakest position to come in, it's annoying for the prospect, and if they wanted to talk to you, they would have reached out already. So the only way that you can empower yourself through that process is by setting up a next step. So if they've said, mate, really want to do this, I just need to get some cash together, can I have a couple of days? And you worked it around and you couldn't get over the objection. Maybe it's legitimate as well, they just didn't have the cash then and there. So you give them that couple of days. Awesome, John. So what you're telling me is by Wednesday, you'll have the $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is, to make the initial deposit. Yep, I will. Okay, great. So let's schedule a time to touch base on Wednesday. I'll give you a quick call at, I'm pretty tied up for the day. How does around 4, actually, can't do 4. It might have to be a touch after hours. How does, like, say, 5, just after 5 work for you? We'll say 5 on the dot, if that works. Yep, 5 on the dot, cool. So now I've got a time scheduled in with John to give him a call at 5 to process his payment, because he's told me that he's going to have that money together then. So I always do that between 5 and 6. 1, because I just like, it's easy. You can just wrap up the day with it. But also, I like to let the prospects feel like I'm doing them a favor by staying back late to help them make their next step. So I would say, like, look, my day is really chockers. I would throw some time. I'll be like, oh, actually, I can't do that. Mate, I'm going to have to do this after hours because I just don't have the time during the day. Could that work for you if I give you a call at, say, 5:15? So now I've got blocked in follow-up times with these prospects to initiate the next step. They feel like I'm doing them a favor because I'm taking time out of my after hours to help them make that step. And it's indicating the value that I have because my days are just too busy to be chasing them around. So I would also do this with most recent deals closed as well. So like if I had the 6 sales or 8 sales from the previous week, I'll just, not with calls, but I'll just flick them a text, had your onboarding go, so on and so forth, just to make sure that they retain and obviously they feel like I'm still connected as they ease into working with their account manager or whoever's taking over from that step, and then just tie up any loose ends until you get a yes or no. So if you do that, you'll never be chasing prospects around. You'll always have next steps. Similar to the early stage follow-up, make sure you set next steps at the end of every conversation. So this approach is what helped me reach 200K a week in new deals. Again, the vehicle was what made it possible. The offer, the timing, and this system, the strategy, the structure that we had, not just in sales, but across everything. So it was a golden ticket for me. And as I said, this isn't possible in every business. You've really got to have all of those things stack up. But that's a whole other story on what to look for in companies to find the ones that give you those best opportunities. So if you want more insights on that, just let me know. I think I've recorded a training. Otherwise, I can record another one. Just comment sales below. And if we get enough demand for it, I will create one. Otherwise, hopefully you got some value from that and saw how simple and structured you can be to closing high volumes of deals per week without burning out, without busting your gut, working from all hours of the morning to all hours of night, just being consistent and doing the right actions. So if you have any questions, drop it in the comments. Otherwise, that's it from me.